All right. So hello, welcome to today's Business Bootcamps for Writers event with the Authors Guild Foundation. Thank you to the National Endowment for Arts, Penguin Random House, and our donors for their support, which allows the Authors Guild Foundation to offer these programs free to writers everywhere. If you're not a member of the Authors Guild, please check out authorsguild.org to learn more about what we do for our members. Tonight, we're here for the acquisitions process, what authors should know, with Jennifer Baker, senior editor at the HarperCollins imprint Amistad Books. Jen is also an author, an MFA faculty member at Bay Path University, and the creator and host of the Minorities in Publishing podcast. Tonight, Jen will give a presentation that aims to bring authors into the editorial acquisitions process to better understand the projects editors pursue and the ones they don't, and how authors' work is received at a traditional publisher. After she's done with her presentation, we will have a little bit of time for QA at the end, and many of you have already submitted your questions. If you haven't during that time, or really any time during the presentation, you can use the little Q&A box that should be at the bottom of your screen, and you can submit your questions there. When it's time for the Q&A, we will get through as many as time allows for us to do. So I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Jen. Jen, thank you very much for being here, and I'll let you take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you, fellow Jen. And thank you all for being here today. So I'm going to have a presentation, which means that's what you're going to see for the majority of this, and you're going to hear my voice. So I see that there's a closed caption option at the bottom of the screen as well, right next to the Q&A box. So please utilize that if you do need to. Because you will not be seeing my face or being able to read my lips during this presentation. So I want to be mindful of that as well. So I'm going to, as noted, I'm a senior editor at Amistad, which is an imprint at HarperCollins, which is one of the big 5 imprints within New York City, but branches out worldwide as well. And I have to date acquired, I got another book on Monday, so 13, I think, to date of this year. And so that may or may not be a number that has flexibility depending on people's roles within the publishing. And again, as Jen said, I'm talking about kind of quote unquote traditional book publishing, which is, you submit to a publishing house and they do all the work mostly. I mean, you're doing work as the author, but we handle the production and the copy editing and the proofreading and all that stuff. I am not talking about self-publishing at all. And so if you have questions about that, please utilize that at another forum. If you do ask a question about that, I'm going to ignore it and we're going to skip over it. So I just want to emphasize, we're not talking about self-publishing. We're talking about, again, quote unquote, traditional publishing, working with a publisher. Cool? Cool. And so there are people who pre-submitted questions and I did receive those. And so I'm going to be able to cover some of those questions if those individuals who asked them are here as I go through the presentation. But again, as mentioned, please pop into the Q&A. And again, once we get to the end of the presentation, and we'll try to answer as much as possible. I'm happy to go a bit over time as well to answer as much as possible as well. If you have the time, I have the time. But again, if it's been answered in the presentation, we'll probably just say, oh, that was answered in the presentation. So hopefully you can stay with us for the whole time. And if not, thank you for being here. And this is being recorded, but I think you should reach out to Authors Guild and maybe Jen can speak after I'm done with the presentation of if the recording will be available after, should you need to leave right at a certain moment, or for those who did registered and weren't able to attend, in which case you weren't here, so who knows. All righty. Gonna share my screen now. Hold on. I haven't shared it yet, so don't freak out that you're not seeing anything. Okay. I am now sharing. I don't see a comment feature, so I'm assuming you see it. So Jen, if you don't see anything, please let me know. All right, cool.
We do see it.
Okay.
All good. And yes, this will be recorded. So any of you that do need to jump away, you can't stay for the whole thing. We do record all of these, and then you can find them on the Authors Guild website or also on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/authorsguild.
Thank you for answering that. And we'll reiterate that at the end as well. So thank you again, and welcome to the book acquisitions process with moi. So I don't know how much you do know, and I don't know how much you don't know, so I'm not going to assume anything. And so please forgive me if some of this is kind of obvious for you. But again, I want to come from a place where we're all at the same level. And so I may in some instances over explain, and hopefully that is just helpful in general. And so this is just kind of like an example wheel, right, of the traditional book publishing process. And it's not encompassing everything, obviously, but I'm trying to get to the big points here. So at the tippy top, what you can see is the manuscript. That's on you. You finished your manuscript. That's what we feel happened right now in this example. So congratulations. That is half the battle. And so now you say, you know what, I would like a literary agent. And so I'm going to pursue agent representation. In which case you do that, and maybe you utilize resources like Poets and Writers or Writer's Digest, which I think are great starting points. There was this website called Literary Rambles, and that was an agent would speak to other agents and kind of give a profile of all these agents. And she did that for many, many years. And I don't know if she's still doing it, but I believe it still exists so that you can kind of go back and just say, hey, who are some of these agents? Another resource is Publishers Marketplace. That is not a free resource. You can get it, anyone can get a subscription to Publishers Marketplace. And again, if you just go to Google Publishers Marketplace, it'll be the first thing that pops up. I believe it's $25 a month, and usually writers, agents, editors, publishers, again, anyone who's like interested in seeing the news that's part of publishing, seeing the deals that are reported, that's usually where you see that is Publishers Marketplace. Reporting your deals, so editors like myself will report our deals, so you can kind of look up who I am and see, oh, these are the types of books Jen has bought for the whole duration of her career, the past 6 months, and da 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 da. And so, agents utilize Publishers Marketplace too to get a sense of who are the new editors. And that's how you can also get a sense of who are the new agents. The editors might be buying quicker than the agents are selling. And so those are, ways to just kind of find resources to be like, okay, how do I learn more about publishers, but also learn more about the agents? So again, Literary Rambles, which is a blog, Writer's Digest, which is a magazine and also has books that list literary agents. Poets and Writers also has editor and agent databases, and Publishers Marketplace, which is subscription only, $25 a month. You could cancel anytime. You can find, what people have been buying, selling, what are featured deals, et cetera, and such, who's gotten foreign rights, things like that. Great, great. So maybe you use any of those resources or whatever, maybe you met an agent at a writer's conference, whatever. And now you are represented by a literary agent and it seems like it's going great, fantastic. So that is when your agent and you get together and you decide where to submit your manuscript. And that is when I come in as editor because say I want it and I'm going to go through an editorial or acquisitions process. It is not a solitary process. I need to talk to other people in order to get buy-in for that, which I will go into detail later in this presentation. From there, if we do acquire the book, then you're writing the book. We're doing a lot of stuff in between, developing all that stuff. But there's like a publisher's launch meeting, and that's when we editors launch a book a year in advance. And so we go by seasons. They might be, so it's basically the first 4 months, the next 4 months, and the next 4 months. So it's like split up in thirds at most big 5 publishers. So we might be doing spring, which is the first 4 months. For say spring 23, I'm launching in spring of 22. So we're telling the whole sales team at our companies, these are the books to prepare for that are coming out next year. And so we do that continuously every year. We're launching stuff a year ahead of time. Manuscript is in production around the time of launch or soon after. Your book goes into production, which is meaning it is formally done developmentally. And so now we're just doing cleanup with copy editing, proofreading, all that stuff. We're putting it in a layout, which means it's getting designed. You're talking about the cover, all that cool stuff is happening. And while that's going on, the marketing and publicity teams are coming together to figure out what they're going to do. Who should they reach out to? Who's on their mind about for this particular book, be it a memoir or a poetry collection or a novel or da 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 da. So those are things we're thinking about at that time. And so I also want to take this moment to say marketing and publicity are 2 separate things in publishing. They are not one and the same. Maybe someone is a marketer slash publicist at a publisher. That can happen, especially at the smaller ones where they might conflate it, not always. But I say, and you will see at the very end, book promotion. So a lot of people will say, how do I market my book? Well, I'm like, okay, well, marketing requires a budget. Publicity is usually for free. That's the simplistic term that it was explained to me when I kept asking people, what's the difference? Because it's about getting visibility, right? Marketing has a budget. Publicity is usually trying to get free word of mouth. Marketing is putting an ad on NPR. Publicity is getting you interviewed on NPR. Those are the differences. So two different teams do two different things with your book. And so as an editor, do not decide your marketing budget, but I can work with marketing and publicity, and you should be talking to them at some point when your book is in production and all that stuff about where you see your book going and stuff like that. And so the final book is coming, but we're getting hyped up and people hyped up before the final book. And then we go back to remind people, oh, the book is out, is out or is coming out. And so you might hear things like week of sale. Week of sale usually means that's the week it comes out. So usually in the US, books come out on Tuesdays. The week of sale is the week we really want the most press for your book. And that's what we're working towards, the week or thereabouts. And then that's when further book promotion happens, be it you're doing interviews, you're writing essays, you're on book lists, you're making book lists, you're touring, you're doing all that. That's all book promotion that is happening usually before the book is finished and preferably continuously after. So that, in a nutshell, is traditional book publishing. So these are usually some questions I ask authors, and I think it's really helpful for you to think about because it'll also kind of navigate what you want in the process and what you will ask for or people who you'll seek out, right? And I always say, are you building a community, not contacts as you create? As I've said the various times I've given this exact presentation, community shows up, contacts may not. So you can know a lot of people, but are you friends? Are they going to do you favors? Are they really interested in seeing you succeed? Or, is this just kind of name dropping? And I get it. I get like trying to accumulate like contacts, but is that really in your best interest? Because I think the work needs to speak for itself, but also again, when you build community, they do show up. And I think you see that, especially when you see the ways that authors are kind of like looking out for each other and things like that. So really, how do you show up for other people if you're expecting them to show up for you when your book is out? Who is your work for? I know we say everybody, and that's true to an extent, right? But as writers, I think we are absolutely looking at audiences because I have to talk about audiences when I purchase a book. And I have to talk about it again when I launch the book that I've acquired. I have to continually say, who is this book for? Well, it's for people who like this, 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 and this. It's for this and this and this. And so you may not be thinking in those terms, but I do think writers should be thinking about who their audience is. I acquire adult books. I acquire graphic novels or graphic memoirs, poetry, nonfiction, and fiction. Again, I acquire adult. I am publishing with another big 5 publisher 2 young adult novels. So young adult is for teens. I write for Black and brown teens, which means my priority, even in who I want to ensure I'm working with and getting this book to as the end result, is Black and brown teens. I'm fine with anybody reading my book, but my focus is Black and brown teens. And that shows up in the work itself, and it shows up in the questions and the way I'm going to talk to my publisher when it comes time for us to think about promotions. How do I get to Black and brown teens? How are we making sure to get to Black and brown teens? I don't think Black and brown teens read New York Times book review. Maybe they do. I want to make sure we're doing that as well as doing all these other things. So when you think about it in that context, you also think about how your book is going to get out there. And that can be in the benefit of how I work with authors because I want to know who they're writing for. I work at Amistad again, that is centrally a Black imprint and for other people of color. So if you're sitting here telling me you write a book, your book is to explain Blackness to people, I'm like, that's not for this imprint. This imprint is already for the community. You don't have to explain anything to the community. And so that automatically means we would not be a good fit. So those are things that I think about as well. What do and don't you know about the industry? This can be huge. You know, I've been working in the industry 20 years. There's still a lot I don't know. And there's no shame in that. But there should be no assumptions made. Ask questions. I'm very candid with the authors I work with. Again, sometimes excessively so, but it's because I really want them to understand that they have a lot of power. Authors, you do have power, and that this book lives and dies with you, you know? So think about that, and think about what you don't know and what you're curious about and what you can get insight into, because you know we shouldn't be keeping anything from you. There are things I'm not going to be able to tell you because of corporate mandate, but I shouldn't be keeping anything from you in terms of like what is going on with your book. That you have every right to know. What's important to you? Is it getting a big advance? An advance is basically an advance against royalties. That is money you don't have to pay back. So when people are talking about, I got, say, $100,000 for my novel, that is money that you get sort of upfront because it's paid, it's portioned out, it's paid in fourths at least. So it's paid upon signing a contract, it's paid upon delivery and acceptance of your manuscript, it's paid upon publication, and it's paid upon a publication of a paperback or 12 months after that. Publishers have extended this due to COVID to try and manage money. And so that's how advances have been split up, at least at big 5 publishers. I can't speak for like mid-tier publishers or indie publishers, how they break it up or how much, you know, like those things range. But at like a big 5, you're getting this money in fourths. So even if you get, say, $500,000 for one book, I'm going to use one because that's easiest to divide, right? That's $125,000 over 4, split in fourths. And that's at each stage. So signing the contract again, delivery of the manuscript and acceptance of it, which could be a year from now, 6 months from now, 2 years from now. Publication of the book, which could be 2 years from now, 3 years from now, depends on when you finish the book. And then 12 months after that. So this is money you're not all getting upfront. And so that might lead people to try and get more money upfront as an advance. Now, again, that's not money you have to pay back, but you have to earn it out before you see any more money from us. Meaning once you have received those monies from the advance, if you've completed all those stages, then you should, if you've earned out means we have made back the money that we gave you. If you've earned out, then you start seeing the royalties that are part of your contract based on the format of your book. And those are all things outlined in the contract and in the offer you would get, and that your agent would review and all that stuff, or you and your agent would review before you're like, yes, good. And so that's what an advance means. Advance against royalties, money you don't pay back unless you do not finish the book. If you do not finish the book or choose not to finish the book, or we do not agree, or something happens, then I have the right to cancel a book and we might pursue that money back. But those are really the only reasons we would want that money back. You know, if you do everything, we're not asking for that money. What does the editor-author relationship and publisher-author relationship look like to you ideally? And that factors in all these other questions as well. Yeah, good, great. I see there's a lot of questions coming in, so hopefully I'm going to be hitting some of those as well, because they're coming in fast and furious. So your literary agent. I am not a literary agent, nor have I ever been a literary agent, but I just wanted to give a rundown about what they do. Your literary agent is your representative and your connection / bridge to publishers. I hear from them. You know, so publishers, many of which don't take unsolicited work. What unsolicited means, it means that we don't actively take, it means you as author can't necessarily reach out to me. That's what that means, unsolicited. An agent can reach out to me any time of day. But an author generally, to make our lives manageable, and to also for safety reasons too, because sadly there are people who are very, very disrespectful and all those things. These are things to like try to keep things manageable for us. And even then it still might not be manageable numbers wise. And so that's what unsolicited means, is like we hear from agents, but we don't hear from authors. Can we? That is up to the editor themselves. I could hear from an author. I might reach out to authors and say, hey, I've read your work in literary magazines, or I heard you talk, or I read your other book, and da 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 da. What are you doing now? Are you represented? Da, da, da. Oh, you're not represented? Well, I'd be interested in seeing your work. But I'm also doing this in mind with like understanding that we might try to pair them with a literary agent because I want authors to be covered. I want their bases to be covered. I want them to have someone with legal understanding of a book contract to look over a book contract before they sign it. And so that's also the benefit of having a literary agent is that agent, especially if they're a good agent, let me emphasize, good agent, that they should be looking out for your best interest, not just looking to make money. They should understand your vision and all that. And that's exactly what I want to happen too, because it's a partnership. I am not a dictator. I am a partner to you as an editor. Yeah. And so that your agent should be that too. But they do work for you, but they need to be respected because guess what? They don't get paid until you get paid. Again, they don't get paid until you get paid. So a literary agent is not someone you should be paying upfront at all. They work with you, you feel like that's a good connection, all that good stuff, wonderful, wonderful. They get 15% usually of what you make. So 15% of that advance and a portion of the royalties as well, should your book earn out. If you think 15% is too much, I don't know what to tell you because they might not even get the full 15%. They might be splitting that 15% with their agency. So it could be 7.5%. I don't think that's too bad a deal, in all honesty. But again, they don't get paid until you get paid. So keep that in mind. Their reputation matters because we talk, agents talk, authors talk, editors talk. We all talk, let's be honest. They should always have your best interest in mind and be able to answer questions you have. So if your agent is being kind of weird and defensive and doesn't want to answer questions you have, that's kind of funky. So you might want to look into that. They should not dictate what you should do. They should offer advice. So they should be hearing what you want and then offering advice that might go into that, right? And that should be the same with your editor. Well, this is what you want. Here's my suggestions. Here's my advice based on what I know and what I can do. Your agent compiles a list of submissions of the editors they will be sending your work to. You should collaborate on this. I get very frustrated, especially as a Black woman and a Black woman editor, when I hear, authors say, well, we didn't, especially authors of color say, well, we didn't send to any editors of color. And I wish we had. And I'll say, well, did you look at the submissions list? Did you collaborate on this? No, my agent just did it. And then I'm like, but you have to be part of it. And remember those resources I said earlier, like Writer's Digest and Publishers Marketplace and stuff like that? We exist, editors of color exist. So if you really want to know where we are, we're not hidden. Some of us might have a bigger online presence. Like I have a very big online presence. I talk a lot on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I share a lot of books that I love. So I have a website, I'm accessible. And many editors might not be, but that doesn't mean they're not, someone you can find, especially Publishers Marketplace, you can find it and then do the research. And that should be a collaborative process with your agent. It shouldn't be your agent says, these are the 20 editors we're going to send your book to. And you're like, cool. And you don't know who those editors are. Because if I start talking to you and I decide I want to talk with you after I get your book, and see what you're like, and you have no idea who I am and no idea what my imprint does, I'm going to be frustrated. I'm going to think, why did you even submit to me? This makes no sense. Like this is your book. You should be involved. Don't just give the reins over. Again, everything I feel like is collaboration. And so, when they do submit your work, they should be collating information from the submissions, the editor responses, be they positive or negative, or really I should say, be they positive or rejection. They should be setting up meetings for those who are interested in your book. They should be getting your feedback, and they may set up an auction. Terminology definitions are coming if interest is high. And they negotiate in your favor over rights, royalties, advance, etc. And they're doing this for free because what? They don't get paid until you get paid. Great, understood? Wonderful. Here's the terminology. Closing date. So this is a date I say a lot. So this is the date the offers from an auction are due to the agent for author consideration. And so these are certain dates that, those vary. For some reason in children's lit, I don't know why, they're more you get more time than an adult lit. Adult lit tends to go very fast when we get submissions and offers and all that stuff. But children's lit has a little bit more time in terms of like, so a children's lit, someone might say, oh, I'm going to close in 2 weeks. Whereas in adult lit, they might say, I'm going to close, it's Thursday and they're going to close on Tuesday. And I'm like, what? So I have to like figure everything out if I hadn't already. So those are just some things to keep in mind. Children's lit is different from adult lit in certain things, but like functionality wise, this is usually how things go. An auction, what is an auction? An auction is something an agent sets up when multiple editors show interest in a project. So even if 2 editors are interested, an auction happens. I sometimes, prefer that, like who's the preferred editor, go with that person. But an auction might happen. If there's something like, say, 10 editors are interested in, they definitely do an auction. And auctions can come in different formats. They could come in best bid, which is 1 bid of advance royalties and promotional plans for the book. So that's a best bid. I don't love auctions. I've participated in them. I've been tech out. I've won them. I've not won them. I duck out sometimes, but best bid is kind of like my ideal because it's one and done. You have until 11 a.m. to give me your best bid, which means my highest offer. What I think I might do an editorial letter too that tells you why I think we'd be great together on this book. And that's one and done. Or they can be done in rounds or stages. So they can be done in 2 rounds. They can be done in like, just to the highest bidder, which gets a bit excessive if they really want a lot of money. Celebrity books tend to do this a lot, where they kind of go until the money goes higher and higher and higher and higher. And so that can happen too. But usually, they might do rounds and stages when there's like, say, 10 or more, or maybe even like 5 or more editors who are interested, that they know are interested in the book, because then they might want to also not just get the money up, but will down the numbers. Whereas, a best bid might be for like a smaller amount, like, oh, there are 4 people who are definitely interested in this book. Let's do a best bid and just see where this goes, and da da da. And so those are things your agent should also be talking to you about. They might say, I want to do an auction because 10 editors have expressed interest in your book. And you might say, okay, that sounds good to me. Or, again, you can ask questions and maybe you're like, well, actually, this editor was my favorite. Can we just kind of go with that editor? That's a thing you can do as an author. I don't think authors do this because I understand trying to get like the best deal possible. But on occasion, agents have kind of made it known that I'm like, I was the favorite. And I was just like, okay, I have to do good by this author to make sure that like I hear it, everyone. And that's usually what a preempt is. A preempt is when an editor makes an offer so that the book can be taken off the table. That's what happened with my book. The 2-book deal I did for one of the big 5 is the editor was super fast. And she was just like, I want this book, let's get it done. And I really liked her. And, she's also a Black woman. And I felt we connected, and she's a really great editor. And so I was like, yeah, that makes sense to me. And I've done that too, where I've just been like, I really want this book. I think this author is amazing. I think we're the best house for this place. And if the author felt that way too, one and done, preempt. And then the agent tells everybody else, so, I know you might have been interested, but they took a preempt. And usually people shouldn't be upset about that unless it's like the day of an auction and that happens, which I've seen happen too, which is not great. An exclusive submission means an editor receives a short window to read a book and make an offer. So someone might say for a novel, they might give me 3 weeks to read the novel. And within that time, if I want that book, I need to act fast because I know no one else has it. For a nonfiction proposal, I might get a week. And then I have to make a decision. And that's, when I'm like, okay, if I have an exclusive, I try to really go fast and stuff like that. And so usually that's how that goes. Okay, so let's go through like the submissions process proper. Cool. So you have an agent and your proposal and your full manuscript is done. Now what? So again, your agent and you compile a list of editors together to submit to. So submissions may happen in batches, tiers, or one big swoop. So if an agent says I'm going wide, that usually means they're sending to maybe 15, 20 editors at one time. Certain agencies just do that to try and get it out the way. And so again, some people might tier it. again, I will say that when my book was on sub last year, I told my agent, it is very important to me that you prioritize BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color, BIPOC editors. Please send to them first. You have the right to say that. If there are people you really want on that list and people you want to see your book first, you tell your agent that. Don't sit back and be like, do whatever you want, because that's a carelessness on your part. And we will be able to see that when we meet, if we meet. So that's that. So then the responses come in. I cannot tell you how long it takes. Someone asked me a question earlier about that. It varies. It varies based on people's schedules. It varies based on the time of year. It varies based on, whether I have 20 submissions, I'm preparing for launch, all my authors are sending me their work, whether I'm sick, whether I'm taking a vacation, whether I need to finish my own book, so I'm taking time. There are all these factors that could come into play. So I can't tell you how long it might take someone to read something. A proposal will take less time to read, but when do I get to it? That's a question that I cannot answer because it depends person to person. This is when agents try to really garner interest, because if there's already interest, that gets me reading faster, right? So it's like, hey, we have interest. Okay. So I might ask the agent, okay, are you setting up meetings? Because that means author meetings with people who might want to work with the author. And I'm like, oh, you're setting up meetings? And they might be like, not yet. And then I'm like, okay, I have a little bit more time. But the agent is usually keeping us updated. Like if there's interest, if there are meetings happening on a closing date, et cetera, et cetera. So again, these rejections might come with feedback. If we do get a rejection, they might be quick rejections, just like I give quick rejections when it's really not for me, as in you're sending me books by white authors. Again, work at a Black and imprint that also represents people of color. So no, that's an auto no. So there's certain things that are just like, I say erotica. I don't do erotica, so that's an automatic no. And editors usually have lists of like what they do want. And again, there's Publishers Marketplace to see what they've purchased. Or like maybe I might suggest it to someone else, like I think it's good, but I think this might be better for this imprint, this editor. Or I might say, I love this, I want to meet the author, I have ideas, I want to get to know them. And so the meeting is the author meeting. And we should always be having this meeting unless maybe I know you already. There's really not a reason for me not to at least meet with you and get to know the book unless we have talked about this book extensively beforehand. So these meetings are scheduled and the agent may or may not be a part of it, but your agent shouldn't be like inserting themselves into this meeting. This should really be a meeting for you to get to know me and me to get to know you. It is not for you to impress me. It is not for anything like that. There's no song and dance. It really is me saying, hey, how much do you know about my imprint? And you might be like, oh, I've researched it, or I've loved it forever, or I'm a super big fan, but you should know who you're talking to. Do not go into an author meeting all like, I don't know, because automatically I'm gonna have a strong distaste for that. So, and that's, ask all the questions, be like, hey, I did research, but I'm really curious about X, Y, and Z. And maybe your agent might chime in and say, oh, you had a question about this, or, oh, remember there was something like this, or here's something that you were concerned about. Do you want to talk to her about it? And so if the agent is there, that makes sense for them to insert themselves only to like kind of reaffirm things that you are curious about as author, but they should not be dominating this conversation. Again, it is an A and B thing, author, editor. That's what this meeting is. And you can always ask follow-up questions afterwards. So don't worry about that. But that's for me to also get information that's going to help in terms of the next slide I show you, in terms of like what I have to do to pursue an acquisition. So again, at this point, after there have been meetings, your agent may or may not set up an auction, depending on the interest they have or things like that, because I might come out and say, had a great time talking to so-and-so, please let me know what the closing date is. That's me alerting them that I'm interested in the book. And that if they have a date in mind, so I might try to move fast to preempt, or I might just wait to see how that auction goes, depending, we'll see. So again, like if you got a deal, congratulations. It is made via an auction, a preempt, or an exclusive submission. And that's usually how that goes. How do I acquire a book? Paperwork. This is what people don't understand. Paperwork. It is never ending. We are always doing paperwork as editors. What am I doing during the day? Paperwork. More so that I am editing your book, I am editing your book after hours. I'm more than likely reading submissions after hours. I'm probably not doing that on the clock. So please understand that. That is part of why it takes so long for us to respond to things. First thing I have to do is a memo. It's called an acquisitions memo. This is a memo that tells the higher ups and editor's vision for a book, how much I want to offer on it, which is the advance number that we spoke about. I talk about competitive titles, which are titles that I think have sold well, that are kind of in the lane of what your book is, may not be exactly, but they are similar. So we have two things. They're editorial comps and they're sales comps. Sales comps are books that have sold very well, that we hope to sell well, that, that's how we compare your book. And then there's editorial comps where it's like, these are really close in subject matter in terms of that. And we're not worried about as sales as much, but we really want to, like, again, who is your book for? Readers of this. That's the editorial comp. Sales comp is more like the genre, the kind of topics you're hitting on. It's kind of a bit more looser, but it's still similar to what your book is. So it wouldn't be me, like if you did literary fiction, I wouldn't necessarily put like something that's totally outside the realm of literary fiction, unless I really felt like it might go with that in terms of a sales comp, meaning sales numbers. But editorially, I really should, like if your book is about witches or your book is kind of horror, I'm looking at other horror books. But I might also look at books that like, oh, there are witches in your book and there's a witch in this, and it's not necessarily horror, it's kind of a thriller, but there's parallels. So those are two things we discuss in-house, is editorial comps and sales comps. And, we're also, again, talking to the market we're trying to reach, which is who do you write for? And so I have to say all of these things in 2 pages, essentially. I have to say what your book is about, what my vision is for your book, who I think will read your book, how I think we'll get people to buy your book, who you are. I have to tell them who you are, and who are we going to partner with to make this all happen. I have to tell them all of this. And then on top of how much I want to spend, and what I'm factoring in is how much have we spent on books of this genre. If I really think this is a book that'll sell, I think I love the voice, I think this will have a great backlist potential, which means that'll be selling for years and years and years. I think it's not just a of the moment book, it's like a legacy book. And those are books I like, books I feel like will be around for a very long time. So those are things that affect the money that I might suggest. And then I have to do this thing called the profit and loss. We say P&Ls. That's a big thing. So this is a spreadsheet denoting the expected earning from the books on projections provided, and ROI. ROI is our return on investment. The higher the ROI, the better it looks. And so again, these are projections. These are estimates of what we hope will happen. We don't know, but we're hoping based on all that information that I compiled in those 2-page memo, and that I've gathered from you and that I've done, and me and my assistant have worked out. And we need to know the market, but we need to know how to sell. And we need to know how to convince people to see what we're seeing if they don't see it in the work itself. And so the profit and loss comes into play because the profit and loss encounters everything we're spending as a publisher. That includes my salary, that includes the printing, that includes audiobook, paying the person who's going to do the audio, whether it be you or whether it be someone else, because we do pay people to do audiobooks. It talks about the ebook, it talks about shipping, it talks about the cover, all that stuff. All that is factored into a profit and loss on top of your advance. And then we look at, or finance really looks at, okay, if you're giving the author this chunk of money, we're thinking we're going to sell this much, and this is how much we sell in each format: hardcover, paperback, audio, ebook, and stuff like that. And this is the money we're going to spend if we print that many copies. And this is how much we have to earn out all that money on top of your advance. That's what we have to think about. And there is a P&L for every book in existence known to man. So those are things we think about, because we have these on our heads. And so I get the memo, I send the memo, and I send your book, manuscript, proposal, whatever. and the P&L to my higher ups, my director, and then the person above my director, who is the publisher. And they have to approve it. I do not have the last say. I have to be good at my job to be able to convince them to see what I see and to invest in that money. And sometimes they may see it and be like, oh my God, yes, actually, let's spend more. like let's offer them more because we really do think that this book can do that. Or they might, like there are different ways. They might be like, oh, well, we had a book like that didn't do great. And, we're not trying to penalize this author. That's not where it's coming from, but it's like, like, are you projecting too high? And why are you projecting that way? So I have to have these conversations if they come up of like, what is the reason for your number? Why did you pick that number in terms of the advance? There are certain amounts where the publisher needs the CEO approval or a higher up approval. Even if it's $1 above their approval amount, the CEO needs to approve it. And so that's another level that we have to go through, because I'm going through 2 people and I might need to go through 3. So please keep that in mind. For some places like children's lit, this happens, I can't say this is always children's lit, but sometimes people do by committee. So if the whole team doesn't like it, you can't acquire it. That's not the case for me. It really is kind of like an individual thing. And if my boss and her boss can support it, then I can acquire it. I don't have to wait by committee. But some teams do have committees, in which case it's like the committee does not agree with this book, and so I cannot acquire that book. So keep that in mind too. But your agent should be kind of aware and can ask editors, like, how is your approval process done? That is a question agents can ask, and they can hopefully explain that to you. So that's something to think about. And so those, if I get all those approvals, then I'm able to make an offer, or I might go into the auction itself. And if I'm in an auction that, goes rounds, I have to update my boss's boss on that. So if I'm in a 2-round auction, say, the first round is at 11 and then the second round is at 2 p.m. And then I go to this first round and I have an approval point. So if I'm in an auction, I'm saying this is as high as I want to go. And if I do want to go higher, I have to get further approval on that. But I usually go like, oh, okay, I'm going to go to an auction. I want to spend $300,000 for one book. That's as high as I want to go. But I'm going to start my first bid at say 125, because I want to see where the bid's going to go. And then if after the first round at 11 a.m., I hear, okay, so the highest bid after the first round is $275,000. And I know my threshold is $300,000. I might go to my publisher and say, okay, the threshold is 275 right now. I want to go to 325. Is that okay? And I have to get that yes or no to be able to go higher. Otherwise, I'm at my threshold of $300,000. And again, if that approval amount of $300,000 is the cap that my publisher has, we now have to go to a CEO or whoever is up higher than that to say, okay, can I get that extra $25,000 because the cap is 300 or 400 or 500, whatever the cap is. So just an example. So that's how I acquire a book. And it is not quick. Like sometimes we could really make things happen if they need to, but this is usually not a quick process. Again, there are levels that there is detail that I have to provide, and there are approval processes that I have to get, and there is paperwork. So what's next if we are entering into a book together? Yay, hopefully we are. So contracts, more paperwork. Contracts for payment and establishing terms. So usually, I'm giving the terms to your, like a kind of snapshot of the terms, like this is the advance, this is how the payout, these are the royalties, this is when I kind of expect the manuscript, which can change. And that's what I'm giving them. And then they're like, yes, that sounds good. I have world rights, North American rights, world English rights, things like that. Those are negotiated as well up front. And then I start a contract based on that. And then we might hear more back and forth between your agent or you, between the contract and our contract appointment, our contract department, in which case they're coming to me with questions and saying, are you okay with this? Are you okay with this? And I'm like, yes, no, can we meet in the middle? And so these are all the terms: non-competes, option clause, royalties, delivery schedules, things like that. Foreign rights. Sometimes I don't get foreign rights. Sometimes your agent wants to keep foreign rights, which is fine. It's actually smart because you can potentially get more money. So foreign rights, again, most of the big five, I know mine, we have a really great foreign rights department that tries to find foreign rights as soon as your book is ready to go. So they're looking at books we've bought and they're like, hey, that sounds interesting. I already have people I think will be interested in it. Da, 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 da. And so the foreign rights, if it's internal, so if I have world rights to your book, if I have foreign rights, which our foreign rights team is trying to find other publishers in the UK and Asia and Brazil and India, whatever, that money goes into the advance that I've spent. So it's within the company. So if it's like HarperCollins UK, that's money that's going into the advance I spent. And so that's where that's going. I don't see that money, but you kind of see that money because they're kind of helping pay the advance. And when we pay high advances, it's even more beneficial. And we do want world rights. If we paid a very, very, very high advance, we're going to be like, we want all the rights at this point, because we paid a lot of money for this book rather than just like North American, which is really the US and Canada when it comes to North American rights. But your agent might say, we want to keep our rights, especially if maybe you got a lower advance. And so they might say, we want to give you North American rights. And I'll be like, okay, fine. In which case they could sell the other rights to other publishers, and then you get that in a separate check. So hopefully that explains foreign rights to you. If it's within my company, it goes to the advance I already paid, and you get additional royalties for the foreign rights. So it's not like you don't see money, but you'll see it in royalties because they're helping pay for your advance within my company. But again, if it's outside, then that's a separate check you're getting because they're paying for UK rights and then they're paying for Japanese rights and da, da, da. And so those all become separate checks. Developmental editing is happening. I should be giving you edits, or if you're like, okay, it's a proposal, I need you to start writing the book. If I saw a proposal, in which case I'm like, I can edit what I've gotten, but if I haven't gotten anything, you need to start writing that book if it's a proposal. And then again, once we finish the developmenting process, remember that wheel, we go into copy editing and book design, which is production, marketing and publicity. Remember, they're two separate departments, not one. And they're trying to get outreach for your book 3 to 6 months before a book's on sale date, which is your pub date. Your tours, these may be events your publisher may or may not plan. Not all publishers plan your tour. They might help connections, or they might get requests and reach out to you and say, hey, these places have requested that you go there. But that can be up on you. Not all publishers pay for tours. That is like most publishers do not pay for tours unless you're very, and that depends again. Before book pubs, authors should alert people about its impending release. Please do not tell people the day it comes out. Tell people multiple times. Don't be shy. We paid money for that book. So we want you to tell people about it. Have a meeting or many meetings with marketing and publicity to learn what their plans are and how to supplement it. Again, talk to us, ask us questions, understand what we are doing, think about who you want to reach, and then also think about, well, hey, can we do this? We think outside the box and all that stuff. Like, you should be thinking about these things and don't hesitate to reach out and ask questions. I love questions. I'm not afraid of questions. And if I don't know, I just say, I don't know. And maybe I can find that information, maybe I can't. You should provide contacts to our team to coordinate on how to get materials to said contacts. So I don't, like some people might be like, celebrities, right? You can just send my book to editors. It's like, I don't know, Oprah. We could send it to Oprah's book club. That's a team that vets it for Oprah before it gets to Oprah. So, that's how that happens with Oprah's book club and stuff like that. But, I don't know her personally. Not many of us do. So, those are things like, don't assume we're just going to be able to just like reach into a hat and pluck it and get you any old thing. Like, if you know people, let us know who you know. I get to let you know who I know, but I can also be realistic, like, well, this is a shot in the dark and we can try it, but I'm going through the channels that everyone else is going through because I don't necessarily have like one-to-one channels. So I think that's my last slide. It is my last slide. Nice. Oh, and I did it in the 40-minute thing. I'm very proud of myself. But I also see 65 questions.
There are a lot of questions. I do not think we will have time to get to all 65 questions, but I'm going to try to grab some and sort through them. Get through a few in the next 15 minutes or so. So let's get that started. Okay. So first question, are book tours, marketing, and publicity part of the negotiations when a book is acquired? Is that covered before signing the contract?
No. I think it's not. You can ask, like we could provide you examples of what we do, but we're not going to give you a full detailed marketing plan. It's going to be more generalized, unless maybe it's like, oh, we can do this, but we won't know until we have a budget. I don't control the budget. So we can give you examples, but it may not come to fruition of like, yes, this will happen.
Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to read them and
yeah, they're a lot.
Okay. If you're an author for a picture book, at what stage does working with an illustrator happen?
You can either know the illustrator and come in as a pair, or that pairing can happen. So if you're the text writer, right, your publisher can work on you very soon after the text is complete, but they should be giving you options of who they might be thinking of. Like you should be coming to them. Same with graphic novels. Like if you're just doing the text and you want an illustrator, you should be thinking about who they are, but you should be finalizing the text, and then they should be approaching someone too.
Okay. How many books do you acquire a year on average, you personally, but also someone at an equivalent professional level? And do you have a team of accountants and lawyers to draw on, or do you need to formulate everything on your own?
A senior editor, it depends. So I saw someone else ask a similar question of like, I acquired 13 books, and is that just for 2021? My books are not coming out in 2021. Anything we've acquired is not coming out like for maybe 16 months to 2 years, 18 months to 2 years. So please keep that in mind. Senior editor can do 8 to 10 books or acquisitions a year. That's a fiscal year. But again, these books aren't coming out that time. I can have, every book I have is either 22, 23, or 24, maybe even 25. So I hope that answers that question and another question, I feel like.
Yes, I think it does. There were a few questions kind of based around, so you love a book as the editor and it doesn't get acquired, or, it doesn't get approved, kind of like if you want to see it acquired, but your publisher does not want to see it acquired, what do you do in those circumstances?
I mean, you could try to adjust the reasoning in that regard, but really if they don't see it, you can't buy it. Sad to say. And sometimes that's really sometimes what it is. It's not like your book isn't good or anything like that. It really is like, we had a book like that and it didn't do well, or we have books kind of like this that are coming out, and so we want to see how those do, or what have you. So if I can't get approval, I literally can't do anything.
Gotcha. Is it a good strategy to look at similar books to mine with regard to length or other aspects that go to P&L?
Absolutely. Always, yes.
How accurate have the sales projections been by your team?
Depends, because also we didn't expect COVID. Right? The unexpected things happen. So sometimes there are books that you think are really going to do well and they just don't hit, even when we put a lot of marketing dollars behind it. And then there are books that do well and may not have had as much marketing dollars, but they just kind of took off, and they might not take off within the year they published. They might take off 5 years later. There are books that have done really well years later. I mean, the anti-racist book, Ibram Kendi, when that book came out, it did fine, and then it blew up like a year later. So think about that too. Like sometimes your books might just be a slow and steady race, and they could be doing well even if they're not on indie bestseller list or New York Times bestseller list. Like that's not, like if that's what's important to you, sorry, not sorry. right? But if it's about getting to the communities, that you could earn out really quickly. If you got $50,000 and you sold 12,000 copies of your book, you've earned out. You're getting royalties now. That's good. If you earned $500,000, if you got a $500,000 advance, you have to sell 100,000 copies. That's a lot of copies. That's a lot of
That's not a
copies.
copy. Does a publishing house aim to have not too many of the same kinds of books, or does it want to have a good variety of the same basic types of books or something else?
Yes. Yeah, we want to have a good variety. I mean, again, it is unfair if it's like, I wrote a mermaid book and I wrote a mermaid book, and it's like obviously not the same book. But in terms of like, we're thinking our other competitors are going to be doing that. So if it's happening in the same house, we might like shift those books to be farther apart, right? So it's like, okay, this mermaid book might come out in June, and let's have the next mermaid book come out next January. So we might do things like that also, especially if the editors are really passionate about it and we can get internal buy-in. So we're always really trying to do that, but this is really a case by case basis because everyone's different, everyone's tastes are different, and things like that. But I've been very supported in my house, but I've also been very good about explaining why I want a book.
Does publishing with smaller houses help build a rep to get an agent?
I think publishing with small houses is great, period. Whether you have an agent or not, whether you have published 20 books or your first one, I think it's great. Yeah. I mean, a lot of great books. Tinkers by Paul Harding was indie press. What is it? Oh, Disha Philya's Secret Lives of Church Ladies, indie press. I believe they were both agented, and they went to indie presses, but didn't hurt them. They've done very well.
Let's see. Lots of questions. Do you do your best to keep a book in print, or does it get remaindered in 3 months if the sales are poor?
No. Your book should not be going out of print for a while. And so you can also go back to the publisher and say, if it's been like, say, 4 years or not even, say your book is out of print and your publisher, you go back to your publisher and say, hey, my book is out of print. Are you doing POD, which is print on demand? Are you doing something? Are you reprinting it? Are you actively reprinting it? And if they're like, no, we don't have plans because the sales have been nil for the past, like if it, again, it's been out for 2 years and then sales really kind of bottom out, they might say no, in which case you could say, okay, can you give me my rights back? And I will try to publish it with someone else or publish it myself. So you can't ask for rights reversion. But they shouldn't be, but if your book is still in print, you really kind of don't have a reason to do that. Because if they're paying for printing, let them pay for the printing. Just let them pay for it.
How much editing do you expect to do with an author after acquisition? What type of editorial feedback do you usually offer? And how much might a book structure change in that process, if at all?
Oh, that's a good question, because all of that could change, especially again with proposals. So proposal is, again, what you promised me, but that can completely change once we start digging into the book or you start writing it and feeling like, oh, this isn't how it's going to go. But we should be talking about that beforehand. So your book hopefully shouldn't be drastically changing. Like I should be telling you that when we talk before the acquisition process of, I really like your book, but I feel like the structure is completely off. And I think you need 2 points of view rather than 5 and da 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 da. So that when we get into the developmental process, that shouldn't be a surprise to you if I'm editing your book. I should be telling you that. And so you can ask those very specific questions in the author meeting. And then it could just change based on like what's going on. But I will tell you, like in my experience, there have been authors who every time I gave feedback started going way left. I line edit, so I give very specific line edits. I will actually like rearrange sentences and say, is this okay? And then I will highlight periods and portions and say, this doesn't make sense. Here's why I feel like this. I give you examples. I do all that stuff. And so if I'm giving you very specific advice and you're like, cool, and you go opposite of what I'm telling you about, and this happens consistently enough that is a problem, I can cancel your book because I can legally say, you are not doing what I asked you to do. But if we are coming together and it's changing for the better, that's fine. But if I'm saying, please focus on this, and you keep changing it, and we're not seeing eye to eye at a certain point, please keep in mind a book can be canceled. They're not often canceled, but it does happen.
Okay. And that reminds me, I did see a question somewhere in this list about, what are those questions that authors should come to this meeting with, right? The meeting that they have with you. What are the types of questions that they should be ready to ask?
The first thing I should be saying is like, they should ask about like, what kind of books do they see your book being in partnership with and my imprint? Because I should be able to answer that. You have every right to ask, what is your vision for this book in terms of who you see it getting to in the marketplace? We should absolutely talk about the details of the book. So if I say, I really love your writing, I don't want to change the writing. What I want to do is enhance certain areas of description and or I think the pacing is very slow, or I think it's too short and I really want to lengthen it. And here are my ideas on how to lengthen it. Like we should really be talking about the content, but also don't hesitate to ask me about what you think makes my imprint a good place for your book to be. And also about me, about like what someone asks about my editing style, ask about how I edit. Because I tell people that I'm like, I'm very, very, not excessive, but I don't handhold. So if you want someone to be your best friend, I'm not the editor for you. Like, I'm kind, I'm respectful, but I'm not gonna handhold and say, oh, it's okay. Like that, I need you to do it, do it. Like, and so if that's not what you need, which is fine, then you might want to get a sense of like how I do things too. And personality wise, will we sync as personality wise? Maybe we wouldn't, and that's perfectly fine too.
Can the author and publisher negotiate about the book's release date?
Yes, absolutely. And that might change again if you need more time to write it. We might have to just give you more time, and that's fine. We can do that.
In general, is there a difference between the standard advances fiction books get versus nonfiction books?
It might vary, but it depends on what you're thinking about, because fiction is a very big category and nonfiction is a very big category. Fiction includes genre fiction. Fiction includes literary fiction. Fiction includes story collections. Fiction includes children's lit. And then nonfiction, memoirs, investigative reporting, reference, essay collections, stuff like that. So maybe an adult novel, we might start at $100,000 for a literary novel, literary fiction. For a memoir, I might start at $125,000.
That was another question, so you answered that for me.
But also keep in mind, I'm talking about big five.
Gotcha.
An indie or a mid-sized publisher. It's not to say indies can't or mid-size can't meet that money, but they might not always. Like a Norton, I know Norton and places like Grove Atlantic can do six-figure advances. They have. So it's not impossible for a mid-sized publisher to do that, but big five usually has a little bit more weight to throw around, for better or worse.
So I think we have time for a couple more.
Yeah.
So talking about advances in general, do most books earn out their advance?
I'm sorry to say no. I'm sorry to say no. Most books do not. Which isn't bad. Don't freak out because you're in the majority. And if your book doesn't earn out, that doesn't necessarily mean you will never get another book deal. I mean, I will be honest, if I paid $500,000 for a book and you sold 10,000 copies, definitely not going to pay $500,000 for your next book. And I'm, sorry, because it feels, capitalism is a thing. But, but don't be, if you got $100,000 and you sold 5,000 copies and now you have another book, don't freak out, you'll never sell another book. It could just be that thing that happens where it's that book didn't take, it didn't find the audience. Your second book could. Your second book can do astronomically well, which brings people back to your first.
There you go. You answered another question. I was just about to
Sweet.
ask if you're right on it. How about children's book advances? How do those differ?
Those differ a lot. Picture book will be lower. Middle grade is hot right now, so it'll be higher. YA kind of tapered, funny enough, but if someone feels like a big YA book will be big, then they might pay higher. Graphic novels are split between people, so understand that. And I think kidlit graphic novels make more than it. A kidlit novel, graphic novel usually has more saleability because it has more spaces, because those are being widely taken in schools and libraries, than an adult graphic novel. That doesn't mean adult graphic novels or graphic memoirs don't work. But the money is very different with graphic novels for children's lit and adult lit, I can say. It might be lower in adult lit and higher in children's lit. But again, YA, again, it's like a fantasy book might get a very big advance, like a 6-figure advance, especially if it's series. A literary YA book might get a smaller advance, like 50K for one book. Picture books, you might get 10,000 for writing the text. And then, I don't think you would share that with the illustrator because that seems unfair, but you might, I don't know, so understand that, like, there are tiers to everything. So there's not one blanket thing to say, this is how much this usually gets. It's always a range based on the genre, the grouping, what's done well. And now it might be something that we're all after now and we're willing to pay. And also keep in mind, if your book was a National Book Award finalist, automatically your price goes up. Like if you won awards, if you are the best, your price automatically goes up. So those are things to also keep in mind. Is there any more?
There are more, but we can't get to them.
Yeah, I see there's like 8. Yeah. That was a dumb question. I'm so sorry.
There's a lot of them. Unfortunately,
are there any more questions? 10 more pop up as you're talking to me.
Exactly. But I know there were a lot of also questions and comments about, will the slides be available and all that? They will be part of the recording. So if you want to go back, you want to watch this again, you want to look through the slides again, we will be sending out that recording to anyone who attended and registered. You should get that in your email tomorrow. You can also find it at authorsguild.org/bootcamps. Also on that page, you can find any of our upcoming boot camps. We don't have any new sessions posted yet, but they are coming soon. We should have a couple next month on marketing and publicity. So definitely stay tuned there. And many of our other offerings, so get on our newsletter list and you will see all of the sessions we offer, like this wonderful one that Jen did for us tonight. So thank you again very much, Jen. This was a wonderfully informative session. And thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you. And reach out to me on Twitter if you have additional questions. Don't pitch me your book though. Your agent can.
There you go. All right. Thank you everyone. Have a nice night.
Take care. Keep safe. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.